What's up, Falcon fans? On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Houston Texans versus the Atlanta Falcons. If you guys like this type of content, hit that like button. If you guys hate this type of content, hit that dislike button. We'll hurt your boy's feelings. Well, maybe just a little bit. But also, if you want to do a huge favor for your boy, by hitting that subscribe button, it will help out the empire grow tremendously. So on that note, let's dive into the 7 categories I have for today's episode, with category number 1. Home field advantage versus home field advantage. I'm going to give my points to the Atlanta Falcons because the Houston Texans will have to travel to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So now let's talk about category number 2. Coaches versus coaches. DeMeco Ryans versus Arthur Smith. So let's start with DeMeco Ryans first. He was drafted way back in the 2006 NFL Draft in the second round out of Alabama, where he played outside linebacker for the Crimson Tide. So in 2006 through 2011, he played for the Houston Texans as their starting middle linebacker. And then in 2012 through 2015, he played for the Philadelphia Eagles, also as their starting linebacker in the middle. After his NFL career was over, he came back in the NFL as the defensive quality head coach for the San Francisco 49ers back in 2017. And 2018 through 2020, he became their insider linebackers coach. And 2021 through 2022, he became their defensive coordinators, where they were ranked number 1 at the top because they really like to use a lot of single and two high safety coverages that really helped them dominate the field. And after that, in 2023, he became the Houston Texans head coach, and they've been balling ever since week 3. Believe me, I would love to dissect and explain to everybody, how much knowledge he has of the game of football when it comes to the defensive side of the ball because of his prowess, but we don't have enough time for that, unfortunately. But just believe me that this guy's the real deal, and he's the GOAT, and he's definitely going to help the Houston Texans rise up. No pun intended there. So now let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons head coach and Arthur Smith. So when it comes to the run, our outside zone is excellent. There's nothing to complain there. Now, our 3-4 base packages are really excellent as well. He improved them from a couple of years ago, and there's no complaints here. So when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons fans, we clearly can see there are 2 major problems with this offensive side of the ball. It is the passing game and the offensive line play, where we're allowing Desmond Ridder to get sacked multiple times, not giving him enough time to check down all of his marks. And this should be Arthur Smith's bread and butter because he's a formal offensive line player. He was coaching the offensive line back in Tennessee, and for some reason, they're not clicking on all cylinders, and I don't know why. He needs to adjust, and he just, for some reason, doesn't seem like he can. I don't know. It's completely bonkers. So I'm going to give my points to the Houston Texans head coach. So now let's talk about category number 3. Falcons quarterback wide receiver versus Texans secondary. So let's start out with the Falcons. Desmond Ridder is a very interesting case because a lot of people either think that he's very trash or he has the potential to be great. Now, we can factor a lot of things about gameplay, his mechanics, the offensive line play, but the one thing I really want to talk about is the lack of big play mobility. Now, so far for the Atlanta Falcons receiving corps, they only have 8 times they go over 20 plus yards. So you can either blame, the timing, the accuracy, the connection, or maybe the play calling. Those are very interesting things to really look at because we really do have some great talent on the wide receiving core, and Drake London that has 3 big plays. Mac Hollins have 2 big plays, and Cordero Hodge last week did a pretty good job when his number was called. So obviously we have the talent. We just have to wait and see how Desmond Ridder will perform in the upcoming games. So now let's talk about the Houston Texans secondary, and they have been the laughingstock for a couple of years now. Probably one of the worst, but this season, DeMeco Ryans has definitely changed that, where every game besides the Colts game, they've been getting an interception. They faced Lamar Jackson. They've been facing Trevor Lawrence, Kenny Pickett, and Gardner Minshew. Now, they've shut them down completely. They have not given up over 300 passing yards. They only gave up 2 passing touchdowns so far in the past 4 games. And their corners are excellent when they're covering over wide receivers, in Austin Griffin, Thomas, and of course, the man himself and Steven Nelson, where he impacts that total defense, where they shut down George Pickens, Michael Pittman Jr., Trey Flowers, and Calvin Ridley, where they completely make sure they didn't go over 100 yards, and they have not allowed a single wide receiver to go over 100 yards so far against them. And now, let's not forget about their secondary, where they have guys like Murray, Stewart, Jimmy Ward, then of course Jalen Petrie, where he's a hard-hitting, strong safety, where the Houston Texans safety department, they already have 2 forced fumbles under the belt. So I'm going to give my points to the Houston Texans secondary because I think they're a much better squad than ours. So now let's talk about category number 4. Falcons running back, tight end, O-line versus the Texans front 7. Let's start out with the Falcons. Unfortunately, the offensive line is a huge question mark when it comes to the receiving end, but for the rushing end, Bijan Robinson has 318 rushing yards, with 53 carries, under 4 game, 3 big plays. Of course, no touchdowns in the run game. In the passing game, yes, 1 touchdown, and he has gotten us 18 first downs, and he's a really crisp, clean, scat back, cutting, making you look stupid and silly type of moments. So there's no problem in that category, but there is a problem and when it comes to Kyle Pitts. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he had that leg injury last season against the Chicago Bears where the safety Jaquan Brisker took him out for the rest of the season. And I know that Kyle Pitts had to come back through all of that endural, mental mind status and thinking, can he be 100% and not hesitate? I get all that, and I'm going to give him a break on that. But what's fascinating to me is the Jonnu Smith and Desmond Ridder connection, where he's targeted 20 times, caught 15 reception for a grand total of 179 receiving yards. No touchdowns, but 8 first down. That's tied first with Bijan Robinson. So that shows the love and the trust that both of them have with each other. And he's leading the team in receiving yards. And, that's something great, and that's something that we can really spark a flame. And I'm all for it. So now let's talk about the Houston Texans front 7, and they are a 4-3 base package defense, and the scariest player so far is not Will Anderson Jr., but Jonathan Grenard, who has 3 sacks out of the 7 for the Houston Texans. They also have Malik Collins, Sheldon Rankins, who all Falcons fans should know well because he's a former Saint. Then they got Christian Harris, Denzel Perryman, and Blake Cashman at their starters. And they got some really good quality backups as well, and Jared Hughes, Corey Littleton, Henry Tua, and then the other list go on. And so they're a very decent team when it comes to pressuring the quarterback, creating turnovers, but the one key thing is that they're lacking in the run game. By so far, they're allowing everybody get over 100 yards against them up the middle, outside, and so that's something that the Atlanta Falcons can definitely take advantage of because we have a really capable, not 2, but 3 down running back duos, and our tight ends have been working so well for Desmond Ridder. That's his safety blanket, his bread and butter, and the offensive line can just rely on the run game. I think we should be fine in this matchup. So I'm going to give my points to the Atlanta Falcons. So now let's talk about category number 5. Texans quarterback wide receiver versus the Falcons secondary. Let's start out with the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud is just on a tear. He has over 1,212 passing yards, 6 total touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's only been sacked 11 times, and so far for the past 2 games against the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, he has not been touched once. So that's a great start. And the crazy thing is, he's not acting like a rookie at all. In fact, he's acting like a veteran. I love that his down the hill throws are amazing. His decision making's on point, and his running game is definitely not to be messed with. And the Atlanta Falcons have a real problem in stopping the quarterback in the run game. So he's definitely a fear factor type of mentality. So I would not underestimate this kid. So now let's talk about the wide receiving core because that's something very interesting we have to look on. Nico Collins is not somebody you want to mess with because he's an absolute beast for CJ Stroud to target him. He's targeted 32 times, caught 22 receptions for a grand total of 428 receiving yards, 3 total touchdowns. His longest was 52 bomb. He has 10 big plays that are over 20 plus yards, 17 first downs. I'm stumbling because it's crazy. And then you have Tank Bell, who's their second high in command, who has 267 receiving yards. He's targeted 24, caught 16, 2 touchdowns. His longest is a 68, and then 3 big plays over 20 plus yards, but 11 first downs. And then, Robert Woods, the old veteran, but he's still kicking it. He has 191 receiving yards, no touchdowns, one big play, but he has 12 first down conversions. So we know that CJ Stroud really likes to move the chains when it comes to the wide receiving positions, because the Texans offense really like to use the running back, tight end, and 3 wide receiver sets to really help CJ Stroud looking down the field and moving the chains fluently. So now let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons secondary. So far, it has to be Jesse Bates III to be our best defensive player. He has 32 total tackles, 3 pass deflections, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles. He's always around the field whenever you need him. He's telling people how to line up, where to go. AJ Terrell got a little bumpy against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he will definitely come back. And then you got Trey Flowers, who's been doing pretty good, and then a little bit not so much, but of course they like to pick on him because he wasn't supposed to be the starter. Then you got Jeff Okudah coming back, and he looked promising. And then the other corners, D. Alford looking really crisp and clean wherever he needs to go. Mike Hughes got a little bit more comfortable in last week's game. And then, Richie Grant is doing his thing. Now, he did miss a couple of things that I know he needs to work on, but I think he could get back up to that because he is the 3rd leading tackler so far. Now, he has not been covering a little bit more I would like, but that's more of the play call in my personal opinion. But so far, I think they've done a really good job. Now, the question is their veteran presence will be the game factor, will be determined to face and confuse these young bucks in the Texans wide receiving core, and of course, CJ Stroud quarterback? I don't think so. So I'm gonna give my points to the Houston Texans because they're just on a roll. They have not been looking that bad. They've been looking, improving every game since week 1. So my points to the Houston Texans. So now let's talk about category number 6. Texans running back, O-line, and tight end versus the Falcons front 7. So let's start out with the Texans. So when it comes to their run game, that's not their bread and butter. Now, they do like running the ball, but they're not very successful so far with Pierce and Singletary so far. But Dameon Pierce is a really good, hard-hitting, down-the-hill thumper type of running back from last year's rookie draft class. So he definitely almost clinched 1,000 rushing yards. But he can surely, turn on a dime if we're not careful enough. But so far right now, they've been averaging less than 3 points, whatever, per carry. So that's a good thing in our favor because they have not had a big yard played over 20 plus rushing yards so far. So we have that factor to go into. And the tight end plays is pretty vanilla. Now, Dalton Schultz is definitely a guy we shouldn't underestimate because when he was with the Cowboys, he was averaging, 600 plus receiving yards per season. And he has 1 touchdown already, including the other tight end and Jordan, where he also has a touchdown. So they have already 2 tight end touchdowns at their disposal compared to the Atlanta Falcons, where I don't think they have any. So that's crazy to think about. And so when we talk about the offensive line, they do a really good job in making sure that CJ Stroud does not get a lot of hurries, does not get a lot of sacks, does not get a lot of pressures, give him enough time to hit those down the middle field balls where it really hurts the defensive side of the ball. Now, then again, they're not doing a good job in the run game to creating enough separation to go through the gap, pushing forward a lot. A lot of times they're just getting stuffed at the point of the attack. So that's a good thing for us because the Atlanta Falcons are a really good team in stopping the run. We have 13 total tackles for losses. We have Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata, who and of course Calais Campbell are just threatening the running backs. Our linebackers and Caden Ellis. Then of course Troy Anderson kind of went down, but so you have Nate Lentman, who's not doing so bad as well. And they're not getting crushed or getting absolutely blown out of coverage. I think they're doing a pretty good sideline to sideline. We have great pass deflections on defensive tackle, defensive end, and linebacking core. The only problem is that we don't create enough turnovers to help our offensive side of the ball. The only turnovers we have are the 3 interceptions by Jesse Bates, our free safety. So no linebackers, no defensive end, creating so much havoc where, it confuses, the quarterbacks. And unfortunately, that's kind of hurting us. And not having a true number 1 pass rush for this team to change the tide of the battlefield is so evident, and clearly we are lacking in that department because Bud Dupree and Arnold Epicadi outside are just not cutting it. They're not getting enough pressures or not getting enough sack and taking down the quarterback in time. Carter, for some reason, he's just a no-show. And then you have the other guys, inside that I was hoping to get more, Grady Jarrett. I was hoping to get more sacks, like at least 4 or 5 at this point, but just not making a total, interior type of destruction. Caden Ellis, I thought he could get more sacks from us, but there's not a lot of those plays down the hill where he's going after it. So the lack of creativity going after the quarterback is definitely needed to improve on. So that's either because of the lack of creativity, of vanilla plays, so packages. There's a lot of things that go into it, but I'm just not seeing a lot of who's going to be that top dog to change the battlefield in time. So I'm going to give my points to the Houston Texans because at the end of the day, they find a way to keep CJ Stroud up. So now let's talk about category number 7. Special teams versus special teams. So for the Atlanta Falcons, obviously Younghoe Koo didn't do anything last game because he wasn't around. He did get the extra point in, so that's good. So far in the season, he only missed 1 field goal and 1 extra point. So when it comes to the Houston Texans side of the ball, their punter, Cameron Johnstone, is on IR. So I don't know if they're going to pick one up, obviously. But then their kicker, who's a beast this season, that has 11 out of 12 field goals completion. He has 9 for 9 extra points, so hasn't missed so far. And the only time he did miss the field goal was in the 50-yard line. So, but I'm going to butcher the crap out of his name. But his name goes Kaima Noalaumeka Oka Kana Pa. I think that's how you say my boy's name. I'm sorry if I butcher it, but I'm going to give my points to the Houston Texans just because I know that CJ Stroud is going to give him a better opportunity to score some points. So now let's talk about the conclusion. My final predictions is that the Atlanta Falcons will fall 30-13. This is my first time actually saying that the Atlanta Falcons will lose because the past 4 games I said we're going to win all those. Clearly, the past 2 games didn't work out for your boy. But you know what? There's no shame in just saying, yeah, we're going to probably take an L in this one. Hopefully, I'm dead wrong, but it just seems like the Houston Texans just check out all the boxes that the Atlanta Falcons should be doing but haven't done in the past couple of games. So on that note, if you guys lasted this long to the very end of the video, thank you so much for taking your own personal time and day to watch these Falcon content videos. I like making these videos. Here's some more on the screen for you guys. So what do Falcons do? Rise up. Until the next episode, show love and peace to the world, and peace.